Hello, I'm Russell Rowland, and this is The Song of Roland, a podcast about American culture. Hey, I'm happy to welcome David Tromblay, a fellow Dzonk author, to the podcast today. Thanks for joining me, David.
Thanks for having me.
Great to meet you.
You too.
So, I read two of your books. I read your latest novel, COYDOG, which just came out last year. Is that right?
Yes, November.
Okay. And I also read your memoir, As You Were, which is also a Dzonk book. Boy, that was a brutal read. Talk to me about you said that
Usually
you left out.
Usually, just to be funny, whenever someone that says that was a brutal read, I was like, well, the research was brutal as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I always appreciate it when a writer is willing to dive deep into some of their more painful memories. But yeah, some of the abuse you suffered in your childhood was pretty awful. So, and you said you left out the worst parts, right?
Yeah, now that collection, a lot of people think it was like a life story, but what it was a collection of stories that my father refuted. And of course, there's mixed in stories about me in the military and me as a veteran afterward.
Yeah.
And that was to refute that, he or they raised me. They didn't raise me. They readied me for war, but they did not ready me for adulthood. What it was my father was terminal, and he still had he was a very violent, dangerous man, and he had a grip over the family. He was a very brutal, drunken, terrible man. But he had, of course, with alcoholism comes piss poor memory. Or you can just bully someone into believing your side, and you just don't want to get hit, and you say, yeah, that's absolutely right. My father, although he never rose to the presidency, he has a lot in common with the current one, the way he acts, the childish behavior, so on and so forth. My father received a terrible traumatic brain injury when he was 5 going on 6, got hit by a car, and even the ambulance then got hit by a dump truck. He was in a cast for a very long time, 3/4 body cast for almost a year, and then after that he was in a wheelchair for a very long time. But he grew up to be just a belligerent, self-centered, self-righteous man, violent at the drop of a hat. He should have been institutionalized if it was not 1951 and he did not have the mother he had. The care he needed was not ready for him. He had what is now considered acquired sociopathy, from lesions on the brain. It basically just makes him a caveman, essentially.
Wow.
So as he was dying, I wanted to set these things right, because I know that when people die, we tend to mythologize them, granting them basically sainthood, just because they're dead and gone, no longer a problem. And I didn't want to give him that, because he had ruled over the family so violently. Actually, I guess you could say the very, very original genesis of As You Were is briefly mentioned in the book. The Christmas before I went to Iraq, I was at my aunt's house with my new wife, and I was speaking to my nephew, telling him some of the training I had gone through. He was 15. I was, I think at the time, 29 or 27. I can't remember. Somewhere in that, 27 or 29. He was nervous about his uncle going to Iraq, of course. It was on the news. He loved and cared about me, and I was reassuring him, telling him about the training I'd gone through, the keto and so on and so forth. I was going to work in a secret prison, essentially. My father overheard the conversation, and he said, "I'll still kick your ass." He put his hand on my shoulder, and I put him into a wrist lock on his knee and stopped right before I, broke the wrist. And everybody came out. He was crying. He said, "David, please stop. You're hurting me." And you know, as I said, he bullied the entire family from birth. Everyone had been hit by him at some point. So everybody saw that, and I let him up, I let him go, and he was kind of wounded, and he was quiet. 18 days later, I was off in Iraq doing my thing, and the following April, because we had that altercation during Christmas, April, my cousin was getting married, and my wife attended. Sometime during the wedding, my father got drunk and took my wife by the throat.
Oh,
and,
Jesus.
There's nothing I could do over, 10,000 miles away. So I started writing. I wrote him a letter and just disowned him. And I was tired of all the bullshit and all the tiptoeing. So I wrote this letter kind of outlining, like, this is what I know about you, and this is what the family thinks of you, and this is what your own mother did to avoid you. Like, we are sick and tired of you. Letter went to him. I'm told he initially tore it up, threw it away, eventually taped it back together. And I was told he didn't speak to anyone in the family for 6 months, and he didn't speak to his sister for 9 months. And she thanked me, said it was the quietest time of her life, because they were Irish twins. They were just a year, not even a year apart. She said it was the first time in her life he didn't speak to her for 9 months. And it was the quietest ever. So that letter was really the genesis. I didn't have it anymore. I sent it to him, but just laying bare that truth and saying, no, that's not what happened. I don't care if you're going to hit me. I'm still going to say what happened. That's very much the genesis of that book.
Right. Well, how did you recover from that? I mean, you still have PTSD or?
Oh, absolutely. You don't recover from that. When I was 14 years old, I got away from my father. He hit me in the head with a baseball bat. I think if the light hits it right, you can kind of see the crack. I got it right here. Yeah, it splits like that. He hit me right here. Hit me in the head with a baseball bat, and I didn't go down. Everything went red, and I had been going to karate classes, and I put them to use. Knocked him out. Called my mother. She was working a few towns away. Said, come get me before he wakes up. Packed everything I could. All my little belongings in a trash bag, and, went out the door. Spent 2 years with my mother. Had a car the year I was 16 going on 17. Got in a car wreck on the way to my job. And my mom gave me an ultimatum because my car was wrecked. She said, you can get an apartment in town or you can give up your job. And I didn't want to give up that money. So I got this tiny little efficiency apartment at right before I turned 17. And I actually got a new place a year later. But I lived on my own for the last 2 years of high school. I worked a 40-hour-a-week job washing dishes for this private dining club. And then joined the military when I joined the military Mother's Day weekend of my senior year of 1996.
So when did you start writing, and when did you decide that it was something that you actually wanted to do for a career?
I started in junior high, and it was I had always read books. The library, when I was a very, very small child, my older sister would take me to the library. It was kind of like a place to just go. It was kind of like a daycare. I could get away from my grandma. I went to the library. It was probably like a mile away or so. I always had books close to me, but in high school, I read Interview with a Vampire. And going through English classes and creative writing classes, I was like, holy shit, this is terrible, because it was like simile inside of a metaphor, inside of a euphemism, and it just like, well, shit, I can do better than this. And then the movie was out at that same time, and there was a line in the movie where he said, well, there's nothing ever said that vampires, would be proven bad or would go to hell or be evil. And like 15-year-old self was like, that seems weird. So I, started researching vampires and started writing a vampire book. And that book, I worked on it while I was in the military. printed it off. I would hit a stopping point. Grammar I did not have. I'm from the Midwest where we speak in double negatives. I was the first person in my family to graduate high school, and with a 2.1 GPA, because I didn't give a shit about school, because I grew up in a blue collar family where trade was everything. Everyone was union. In my senior year of high school, I had like 4 classes, one of which was shop class, and I just built shit for the school. And I was working 40 hours a week, so that was my trajectory. I joined the military just to get the hell out of town. I came from such a weird family. I could have been a pulp character instead of a pulp writer. Where, my grandfather was a muscle for the Irish mob. He was killing people and disappearing them in the woods. My father was just an insane individual. There's stories in that aren't in the book that are going to be in another book I'm working on. That is going to focus on him very, very much so as the character. But no, I ran away to the army. I got sick. I got really messed up. I went to infantry school down in Georgia. Had an anaphylactic reaction to poison ivy. Got sent home. Then for 4 years, I did all kinds of things. I worked for the BNSF Railroad between LA and Little Rock for over a year. I worked at the Radisson Hotel for 2 years. And it was on my second year, I was voted Employee of the Year. And I was 23 years old, and that like pissed me off. I was like, that's like the biggest thing I've done. I was like, I need to get the fuck out of here. So I found the Navy recruiter, because there's no poison ivy on ships. When were you active?
I joined the Navy in '86. Okay. And Orlando they still had a boot camp there, so I went to Orlando first. Yeah. So, which side of the family is Native?
My father.
Okay. And you ended up going to the Institute of Native Art in Santa Fe, which is a great school for Native arts. How did that happen, and what was that experience like?
It was very serendipitous. I saw a magazine talking about the program in the VA waiting room. I applied to the school. I was graduating. I was working on my undergrad at UWS. I was, of course, 36 years old when I started. Okay. So 38 when I graduated in 2016. I was looking for a program, and I had, I had 27 months left on my GI Bill, and I found a 24-month program. Perfect. So I applied, and I actually got my yes the week before AWP in Minneapolis. So I went to AWP in Minneapolis just to like wander around and say hi to people. But I applied to go there because I wanted to be around Native storytellers, and that's what I got. It was very cool. I mean, I don't know how many different nations were represented, but it was a good time. 2 years. Learned a lot, made some good friends. As time happens, now I graduated in 2000. That's crazy to think it was 6 years ago already. There's probably 3 or 4 people that I still talk to, and a couple of the mentors that I still keep up with. Hugely grateful that Stephen Graham Jones is now in the stratosphere, and he's almost, I can get an email from him because I have his super private email. That's the only way I can get a hold of him anymore, because he's finally earned so much of his credit that was due.
He's good. He contributed to an anthology I did a few years ago, and I just loved what he wrote for that. So he was one of your teachers down there?
He was. He ended up being basically my main guy because of the way you have to have a repeat. We were only so many people deep in the program, so I got to have him twice.
What did you learn from him?
I learned not to overthink my writing and keep up. I was very, very nervous the first time I sent in my writing sample, because what we would do, we would send in 20 pages, 5,000 words every month, and we would turn over these craft papers after reading books, and what element of craft you can pull out of this novel or this book that you've read. And the first thing he gave me was a compliment because I have a habit of time traveling. When I go, like, there's a sentence in As You Were where I go down in the basement in the first grade, come up in the sixth grade. And he says, David, I don't know how you do this. And normally I tell my students not how to do this because I don't know how to teach it. But I will watch you do this and watch you develop this manuscript, and I'll learn from you. And that made me sit back and be like, okay. So he's, it's going to be a symbiosis. And he went back and then with the craft paper, of course, it was Stephen Graham Jones. This was a guy that I had been made aware of as an undergrad, and, it just happenstance made me his student. So my first craft paper, he came back, he's like, this is so well written. I don't know what you think of this book, or I don't know anything. He goes, I need you to not be so academic, and I need you to actually speak to me in your writing. And that's, I think, where I felt okay with the casual voice.
Okay.
I've been applauded for that. And then again with the dialogue. And my dialogues, I was writing the essentials at the same time, but he never got to see that. And that is 100% dialogue. Basically a guy talking to himself, but he's got a passenger in his vehicle. That's as much as I can say about that. But it's pure dialogue versus no dialogue. 'Cause I tuned into with a memoir. If you see a lot of quotations, unless it is recent history, recorded history, those quotations are largely bullshit. So I steered away from that, but I also needed to exercise that muscle while I was writing.
So COYDOG is actually a compilation of 2 short books, right?
Yes. It was supposed to be a serialized
2 novellas, basically.
Yeah, it was supposed to. No, I was going to continue the series, but there was a reorganization at the publisher, and we parted ways. And the book was published, I felt, a little too early, and there were some things that weren't properly fleshed out. I didn't think the book was given. And a lot of books flew on or just kind of disappeared during the pandemic. So many books came out. There was just you couldn't do a book tour, you couldn't do proper. I mean, everything got distracted and everyone got tired of their screens.
So it kind of was a good thing that it ended up turning into a single book. When did Dizon pick it up?
They picked it up. I'm trying to think of when we had the conversation, but I think I was trying to pitch them the whole series and it's essentially an ode to Jim Thompson's Oklahoma, his Oklahoma. Showing that, these minor characters are, alive and well in Oklahoma. They're not the minor characters. They're the everyday people that make up Oklahoma, is what I was kind of drive for. Like, I jokingly said, in being that I am an indigenous writer, this is a land acknowledgement, but it's a land acknowledgement to Jim Thompson and to Chester Gould, who are, 2 amazing pulp kings that came out of Oklahoma.
Yeah, you can definitely see the Jim Thompson influence on that book. So the main character is Moses Kincaid, and he's a native bounty hunter, which is kind of a fun twist on the usual. So how did that come about?
Like you said, the twist on the usual. The seed got planted when I was leaving Army boot camp. The big guy, Drill Sergeant Fernandez, came through. I was watching the phones one day, and of course I was still messed up with poison ivy. My hands looked like Q-tips, but he threw this magazine in front of me, and it was a modern day look at the bounty hunter. No, this was 1996, and he said, I think you'd be pretty good at that, because I was a big bastard. At that point in my life, I was 235 pounds at 5'8". I was 12% body fat. I was taking supplements that had farm animals on the labels. I mean, but I was working riot control at that time too in Vieques. So, I mean, the danger was real. as was, after that I went to Iraq and I was working in a prison with some large men. You don't want 5'8's not a good height to be in law enforcement.
So, one of the things I liked about COYDOG was that, you kind of touch on a lot of Native American themes, but it's not really the focus of the book. It's just sort of organically part of the story. Was that a conscious decision on your part?
Absolutely. Oklahoma and my life is, it's steeped in indigenous. It is everywhere, so it's not worth mentioning. And part of the lessons of going through IAI and part of the comfort of going through there, the reason why Native students go there is you don't have to explain yourself.
Right.
You can just let the art speak, and as you would look in normal writing for context clues. Being born on the reservation and having close friends that grew up on the reservation that knew my father, knew my family, I would be around them and I would hear some of the racism things that were, things were thrown at them that would just infuriate me. And a lot of times I would just jump on them and beat them up. I got in a lot of trouble in school. I don't talk about high school at all, really. And as you were, I got in a lot of fights, and I never started a fight whatsoever. But I ended a lot of them. If I saw something, you can imagine why I hated bullies.
Sure.
Which also, kind of bleeds into why I joined the military, is because I hated bullies.
The other thing I liked about this book is it's a mystery. It's kind of a mystery, but it's really more about the characters and the impact of violence on these people.
Well, it is, and it's kind of the culture of the violence. I was talking about, Oklahoma is indigenous in its own right, where there are, until recently, until 2023, the McCurt ruling, all of the reservations were just kind of made up and understood, but they weren't real. They weren't they didn't have a boundary, but they now do. So there's a lot of talk in that, and then there's I have more, a little bit of clarity here. Some of the things that I wanted to address and not have it in the face of the book, but I come from Blood Quantum Ojibwe. Of course, Moses Kincaid is kind of more based off, because you always try to distance yourself. We had one friend growing up who was Ho-Chunk, Teddy Thompson. Met him in the 7th grade. He was a football player. He looked like he was, ready for the NFL when he was 12. It was ridiculous. And the rest of us all looked like wet spaghetti at that time. So I have kind of this amalgamation of him and another guy who ended up becoming he became a native power lifter. And all of us come from Quantum. My father was a quarter. I'm less than a quarter, so I can't be enrolled. But having a Quantum Indian, and using Indian as a legal term, go down to Oklahoma, where everyone is enrolled from the Dawes rolls, where if you have one single native ancestor from 200 years ago, you're considered full blood.
Oh, really?
So you'll have gingers and blonde hair, blue eyes, and you will have also black people who were freemen, who actually the Choctaw and the Cherokee and Creek, I believe, were the last to free their slaves, and they were granted citizenship. So they're not necessarily indigenous, but they are a citizen of the nation when they were given their freedom. So having Moses learn that and stumble his way through that, learning what indigenous identity looks like. There is no pan-indigenous identity. He's learning that. He's going through, even in Oklahoma, there's 35 different nations here. Each one of them are so different and count themselves different. So I wanted to address that as well. But then you also have the lateral racism. We addressed that in the show somewhat. Like with our governor right now, who does everything he can against tribal sovereignty, but he himself is a Cherokee citizen.
Oh, wow.
So I wanted to weave all that I could and try, but not have it be a character in the book.
Right. Well, I think you did a nice job of that, developing that kind of balance. But yeah, I mean, the native issues are always so damn complicated, right?
Yeah.
So talk to me about how you got involved in the Lowdown. I just love that show. I'm a huge Ethan Hawke fan anyway. So.
Sorry, meeting Ethan was something. So I go back to I brushed shoulders with Sterlin Harjo.
Okay.
At that time, he was visiting, and he came back a few times. He had some smaller films, and he had a few documentaries that he had made, and they were pretty cool, and he was just a cool guy to talk to. I was going to have Brandon Hobson do my interview for Magic City Books when we had the As You Were debut. And Brandon's book, I can't remember which one it was at that time. It was going to come out the same week. So he bowed out. He couldn't do it. I mean, obviously that would be kind of weird. Too hectic to do. So he referred me to Sterlin. I was like, well, that's a great idea because he's a documentary maker. He knows how to ask questions. So he read it, and he said he was traumatized by it, but it was some of the best writing that he had ever read. So a few years passed by. I ended up living in Oklahoma, just a few blocks from him, actually. And I had interest from a Hollywood producer, and my initial fear, because it was a guy who wasn't indigenous and he had no ties to the indigenous culture, I was afraid of the book becoming whitewashed. Not that I'm, a gatekeeper of indigenous identity or anything like that. I think I'm very much on the outskirts. My father was Indian, but I am not. I make sure people understand that.
Right.
I sent him a copy of the book, and I was like, hey, if a studio has interest, would you have interest in it? And he looked at it and he said yes. And then it kind of died out. They had the initial we had a studio looking at it right before the strike, and everything went quiet. Shortly after the strike, streaming changed the way books are developed nowadays so much. Now people, instead of just buying the rights and going off and making it, they'll develop it, or they'll get the shopping rights and they'll take it to the streaming services and so on and so forth. It's a nightmare. So everything went quiet after that, and the court, like I said, his contract went up, so I gave Sterlin a call. I texted him out of the blue and said, hey, there's nobody actively working on this. Do you want to direct this thing and move forward with it? And he called me back and he said, no. He's like, he said, do you want to help me fix my TV show? And he was actually in the middle of filming it. He was sitting there with Ethan Hawke at the time.
Oh my gosh.
And he gave me.
So this was after Reservation Dogs?
This was after Reservation Dogs. Yeah. This was just last May. 6 weeks went by, and he had me in the office. He showed me the trailer, and he kind of told me where he wanted to go, and told me about the inspiration. And I knew about the muse that was behind the character of Lee.
So it's based on a true story.
What we've done is taken a real person, bring him back to life. We gave him a new adventure to go on, basically.
Okay.
Telling a story adjacent to the story that happened. This is the man that exposed how deeply ingrained the KKK was in some of the families that controlled Oklahoma. And then he is principal in uncovering the massacre and where the bodies were found and things of that nature. He uncovered a lot of things. He peeled a lot of scabs back. Unfortunately, he took his life.
Oh, he did?
He did.
Oh, man.
Yeah. And his legacy was not forgotten. So I knew about him, and I had heard about the things he had done and the disruptions he had made and the healing that he had started. And, of course, the documentaries that were made by Sterlin. When Sterlin was, he was riding around in the guy's van and following along with them and going on adventures with them. And he wanted to do something with his legacy. And we did that. Sterlin had read COYDOG, and he's like, this is exactly... he's like, you're a Jim Thompson fan. You get Oklahoma. You understand it. And that was part of what I argued with me being there, was that I'm new enough to Oklahoma that I understand what's weird and what makes Oklahoma unique. I think it's called the curse of knowledge, which is what I told Sterlin he had. I'm like, you don't really get what's weird and cool and doesn't happen in other places. So that was part of me being there. But no, he brought Walter Mosley.
Oh, did he?
Yeah, Walter Mosley was there. He brought in Walter Mosley, myself, and Lou Berney as 3 crime writers. that would help him, because he comes from comedy, and most of his production team comes from that same comedy background that came up through basically like a troupe of guys together making films. So we were kind of guardrails and saying, oh, by the way, if you do that, you can't do that. Walter is, of course, just, he can spew all these definitions of different noir aspects out of thin air, and he's a walking, dictionary for this stuff. And of course, a lot of people don't know that he was Sterlin Harjo's Sundance Academy mentor at the age of 22.
Oh, wow.
So this has come full circle where he's brought him back into, now he's a showrunner.
Wow.
And
that's awesome.
So, yeah, and of course, Walter wrote episode 7. Of course, Sterlin wrote the pilot, episode 1. And then we went back and made some changes here and there, but everybody wrote every episode, but only one person could write the script, the physical script.
That makes sense.
And there was only so many of those to go around. There's 10 people in the writer's room. Sterlin wrote the first and the last. That left, 6 more to go. At the end of it, I was finishing up COYDOG, and Lou was jumping on his next book. I think we had a book come out 6 weeks apart. So neither of us got assigned to do that. Walter did, I think, just because that episode, everything was, we kind of curtailed it, that Walter had to write that episode. Where,
yeah, why not have Walter Mosley do it, right?
Yeah. In your earlier questions, you asked if I was on the set. It was like, I'm in episode 4.
Okay.
Yeah, I was supposed to have a speaking role, but I told them I didn't want to do that the day of. So they rewrote it. So there's daily rewrites, and they'll have, you'll have your script, like your initial script, and then you have your blue copy, your pink copy, and all this kind of good stuff. You've got to register it and certify it with the union, and none of that stuff, that's all foreign to me. So I just, I don't want to do any of this stuff. So they put us down as staff writers. But every single episode was a collaboration.
That must have been really fun.
It was, and watching it, because I wasn't there watching the rewrites or I wasn't keeping up with things because I had a million other things going on. I essentially rewrote COYDOG. So it was, I got to see all kinds of stuff.
So what are you working on now, David?
I have my next book, which I've been working on since December 2019, which is highly irregular for me. I used to be able to knock out 4 books a year and then edit them over however long, but I had a bad personal tragedy in 2020, kind of slowed everything down. So I'm working on this book. It would have been my PhD creative dissertation, so the idea was to have it come out as the next Anadarko County book, as a very much a crime book, very much a philosophical book, as a PhD would tend to be. We are looking for a home for it right now. I have an agent reading it very enthusiastically. They didn't know I was unrepresented, but so I'm kind of in a sad place where I thought this book was going to come out, because it takes place the week that Elvis died, which is, August, middle of August 1977, which was when my mother was due, which was when I chose that. I thought it'd be kind of a fun thing to do. Plus, looking at the headlines from them, and now 50 years later. So I wanted the book to drop August of 2027, but unless we find a home for it and they can absolutely just immediately launch into the process, I don't think that's going to happen. So kind of makes me sad that book's not going to launch when it was essentially designed to. But it's been the hardest book to write, and it's very much now steeped in Irish folklore, and making it seem like it's not is part of the challenge. The voice is completely different. As I had a few conversations about the book with Michelle at Design. They decided not to take it just because it is such a heavy-handed crime novel, and it is inflammatory at this point right now with the things in it. It's it's shadowing a lot of things that are happening on the streets, but it wasn't meant to. I just had, in part of the book, I have the police quit en masse because they're mad, and then they get hired as a private army. So, and that was just a happenstance. It was just a plot point I made up. Yeah. And of course, there is a character that, a man comes to town as, you only have 3 plots, of course, so I had to pick one of them. Man comes to town and he serves as the rope the bad cops hang themselves while asking what makes the good cop good. And that's the story that he keeps asking these police officers, and he has one that keeps on trying to answer it. And as this thing unravels, he finally gets to the answer, and the answer is there is no answer. But when you stop asking, then you have the answer for what makes the bad cop bad. So that's I'm not really giving the book away because I've got some very interesting rejections on it, and they just what I'm doing sentence by it was so funny. He's like, each word in each sentence was specifically chosen. I was like, yeah, that's kind of the whole writing process.
Yeah, that's true.
So no, Michelle said COYDOG was so well written that getting better is exponentially harder every time you come up with another book. Getting better.
Yeah. When
you set yourself up for it. Some people have their formula and they have their sound and their voice, and that's that. And every time I come to the page, it's a new experiment, it's a new voice, it's a new persona. I have soundtracks that I have that essentially hypnotize me into those eras. I have, COYDOG had its own soundtrack. What I see as the book 2 of that has its own soundtrack, which would be an exploration of the filthy 13 motorcycle gang. The book that I'm writing about my father in the style of like not an episode, but a series of Fargo, even though Fargo would never take it because he writes all his own stuff. See Dick Run, that's got its own 1951 kind of. That will probably be the most Jim Thompson-esque book, telling my father's story as he was born. That's going to be the one that I could probably sit down and power through and knock out in 8 weeks, because I know the story, because it's already happened. I just have to choose the words that I put together. That's going to be a fun one. I mean, my father, of course, I'll share this with you because this is probably 2-3 books down the road and everyone will forget by then. But of course, my father was hit by the car and he spent 3 years in a wheelchair. And at one point, his younger sister tried to drown him.
Oh, wow.
This is how the book opens. He's sitting on the dock in his wheelchair. His sister and his cousins are playing in the water. My grandma and my aunt are up in the cabin about 100 yards away, smoking and just sitting in front of the fan, staying in the shade. And my grandma gets up and goes to the outhouse behind the cabin, and my aunt gets up, 6 years old, and goes to push my father, her 8-year-old brother, in the water to drown him because she's so sick of his abuse and just being around him. Yeah, he's such an evil bastard, even as a child. Lo and behold, he started bouncing. And I found out he wasn't crippled, he was weakened. And when he got in the water, he was able to walk. My grandma came screaming out of there. My aunt told her, Bobby's drowned in Richie. And my grandma came screaming down in the water, and she came around the corner, and there he was. And she packed up. She basically canceled summer vacation, and they all went home, and he started hydrotherapy the next week.
Oh, wow.
And if she wouldn't have tried to drown him, he would have stayed in that wheelchair. Wow. So, then, flash forward to after he passed away, I was having lunch with her, and she's like, David, you got to realize, before the car accident, he would take his belt off, his leather belt, and wrap it around and beat his sister.
Oh, so he was bad even before that.
Yeah. He was born that way. Just some people are born that way. There is nothing you can do. We have to,
Yeah, that was one of the things that was really striking to me about that story, was that how unapologetic he was. I mean, There's just no sign of even awareness of what damage he's doing to people.
The thing is, there's a term I learned. It's called terminal clarity. You hear about people who were in dementia or just deteriorated states will have a moment of or a day of clarity before they die. And he had one of these where he was telling my cousin, he said, I know what I've done. I know where I'm going. At no time did he apologize. He didn't say, I wish I had done better. He just said, I know where I'm going. I know I'm going to hell. That's all he said. He didn't say, I'm sorry. He didn't say, I wish I'd done different. He said, I know what I am. So it's hard to wrestle with that. And Stephen Graham Jones, he applauded in As You Were, because I'm trying to make sense of it, not only for myself, but for the reader.
Sure.
So I'm explaining their actions to you and, trying to make sense of it to myself. People are not that exciting or new in their thought process. We're pretty, animalistic, and we're the patterns are there. So, if you do this or if you go back far enough, you can find the root to the problem. Be it, something, grandma got sent off to the boarding house, or my father didn't get this, or my father shouldn't have been a father. Things like that you have to work out in the writing. Just peeling it back, turning yourself into a fictional character as a son of a bitch. And I think if I didn't have all that time of disassociating from just the violence, and also it's skimmed over largely in As You Were, but I didn't speak until I was 4 years old, but I could. I was left alone in my playpen until I was 4, and I have curvature of the spine because of it. But yeah, I didn't leave my playpen until I was 4, so I just kind of stayed slumped over. Stayed in the playpen, and they had me tested when I was 3. I found out, my mom did. I could speak. I had the normal, problems with vowels that children did at that age. I just chose not to speak. I essentially took a vow of silence.
Wow.
Now, there's also, my father was so hair triggered that I learned to step and act and be so silent, plus I didn't speak, that my mom tied a harness and a small belt to me, like a cat bell, and so to know where I was going, because I would just take off sometimes. We did live like 3/4 of a mile from a swamp that I would go to and play in the culvert sometimes. That was part of it, but I was like a little ninja. I was just doing everything to be the third person, I think. I dropped that line in As You Were at one point after my grandma died. They're talking about you in the third person. And I'm Gen X, but I was raised by that silent generation. My boomer parents abandoned me completely. So I've got that I was raised as the third person, as a silent observer, as you were seen and not heard.
Right.
So, but yeah, you asked the question initially is like, how did I survive that? And it's that I think from all the testing that they did with me is I was intelligent. Everything with all the diagnosis and the PTSD and so on and so forth that they run you through is intelligence is what saved me. And I was able to collapse inside myself and just watch and learn and absorb and get through the experience. Right. And it essentially made me an observer, a writer.
Right. Yeah. Clearly worked out.
Yeah. I saw a meme years ago that said, "Thanks for giving me enough trauma to make me an entertainer and not a stripper."
There you go. Well, hey, thanks a lot, David. I enjoyed it.
Thank you so much.
I appreciate it. Thanks a lot for joining me for this episode of The Song of Roland, a podcast about American culture. I want to thank my guest, David Tromblay, author of COYDOG and As You Were, and also one of the writers for The Lowdown. I'd also like to thank Stephen Gillis of Dzonk Books for sponsoring this podcast, and I want to thank Tiffany Hauk for her wonderful production skills, and I would like to thank my son Fletcher for his musical contributions. Join me again next time for another episode of The Song of Roland.